now we will discuss the CI/CD, but from different perspective than we usually do. Just a exclaimer: if I say any name of the tool, it is or by mistake, or because I want to show you some example on what I'm talking about. And right, so but first thing which I think need to understand is that if you have Grafana, Jenkins, I'm sorry, this is from another talk. If you have Jenkins installed, it doesn't mean that you have CI/CD, okay? The only thing you have is Jenkins, which is quite nice, powerful tool, but it is just the tool. It's not the CI/CD. CI/CD is more like a process, like a continuous, well, we have two Cs in this, continuous process, which should be implemented in the organization. So my name is Pawel Piwosz. As you already know, I'm DevOps Institute Ambassador, CD Foundation Ambassador, and AWS Community Builder. But I will not talk about AWS today, fortunately, I think, for you. So let's think how we build in general the CI/CD. What you consider if you start building CI/CD pipeline, for example, right? So generally, and it was my case as well. Generally, we take a code, right? We have some environments, like dev, prod, pre-prod, RC, QA maybe. Then we know some tool. And on the end, we land with our pipeline. Right? And it works pretty fine. But generally, if we have a couple of teams, couple of people in different teams with different knowledge, we land with some messy landscape, right? And generally, this may lead to the problem. Because what we consider, really, when we start thinking about the pipelines is the environments, as I said, is the tooling, as I said. Sometimes if you are senior DevOps, you think about the tests, which need to go into the pipelines. Sometimes you think about releases, how we will release the stuff. If you are on the like a lead position, you think even about the branching. Right? So release is the end of the chain, branching is the beginning of the chain. And those of us who are like moving around the office 5 centimeters over the ground, they think even about something what is called revert. And here I should add automated revert, right? What makes things even more complicated. So what can go wrong with this approach? Well, everything. And I tell you why. Because what we will do, we will look on the CI/CD as a process, as a something what should glue all actions in the organization from the different view, from the helicopter view. So we will look on it more like a blocks than just the simple actions in the pipeline. We'll take a look from this, not from the engineer perspective, but from the organization perspective. And also not from the pipeline itself perspective, but from the process view, okay? And now the important element, the first element which I want to somehow highlight is the organization. Why? Because, well, in fact, everything what is going on inside the organization, right? And we can say, yes, we have self-organizing teams, agile stuff, etc., etc., etc. But on the end of the day, we need to remember about one thing. It's not we as a team or as an employee who sell the product. The organization sells the product, right? And the organization earns money because of that, because organization is doing the business, not we as a team. And here we need to touch a very, very, very important element, which is Conway's law. And if you are not familiar with that, I will explain it in a second. But why this is important? Because today in this kind of self-organizing teams, microservices world, etc., 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 the split between elements is bigger than it was like some years ago, right? So the construction of the application in the microservices world is totally different than in the monolith world. Okay? And what Conway's law says here about this specific issue is that the design of the system you do is a mirror of the communication structure of your organization. So in other words, if you have two components which should talk very tightly together, and those two teams who are who are responsible for those components are not talking together, you have a problem, because these components will not talk properly together. You may be sure about that, right? And this leads to very interesting concept, or even, we can say concept, right? Which is the team topologies. And this drawing here is based on the team topologies by two great guys, Mr. Skelton and Mr. Pai. And this was, I think, the start of discussion that the platform team now is the next DevOps, what is not true, but anyway. And here you see how those, on this example, how those teams should cooperate and communicate with each other, right? So this communication, cooperation in this microservices kind of shuttered approach to developing software, how this communication, how this alignment is important, right? So I touched one element is organization. It's on the top on this list, and then you have a lot of others, right? And what is and I have the kind of perverse fun doing that, putting security on the end, right? Like less important maybe, but honestly speaking, we need to think about security not just for the software itself or the application itself or the infrastructure itself, but CI/CD is also part of this of these elements, right? And there is a lot of important points which we need to take care of in terms of security for the CI/CD, for the pipelines, for the tools we use. Okay, and very briefly, I will tell you about this a little bit late, as you see, almost on the end. Right. So we talk about organization a little bit. So what about the environments? It's simple, right? We have dev, QA, pre-prod, prod. So where is the magic here, right? Well, the magic is in the structure of those environments and also the ownership, because there is a big possibility that, especially in some industries, you may have full access to the development environment, right? But totally no access to the production one. The only, let's say, users which are able to interact with this production environment is the infrastructure as code through CI/CD and monitoring. So you cannot just log there and do stuff like you do on dev, right? So you need to remember that. And also the ownership, right? So who owns those environments? Who is responsible for them? Because again, the whole networking stuff around your development environment may be in your responsibility. But on production, there may be completely different people. And if you assume something, believe me, regarding Murphy's Law, your assumption is wrong. I've been there too many times already. And as a structure, I mean that you have an environment, but also you have this kind of surroundings, which I already mentioned. So here we think about, for example, databases, data in these databases, different free parties, plugins, different free parties, tools which are used by our application. Do we mock them? And if yes, how, right? So these elements also are important to understand. Next element is branching strategy. And as simple as it sounds, it is not. Because, in fact, regarding to the architecture approach to the application or to the system, we should select the proper branching approach. And what kind of branching we have? Well, starting with the simplest trunk, then we have GitHub flow. We can have like stories/task approach to branching, and even we can have environments, right? And now imagine, if you are not familiar with this approach, you have a Git flow, which already contains a lot of branches inside, and you multiply this number of branches by number of environments, and you can land with 30 long-lived or always-lived branches, which is totally crazy, right? What is the code structure? What is the documentation approach? How you provide this documentation, what you do and how you deal with versioning, how you design your repositories. And here I think also about, do you have infrastructure as code and let's say the technical infrastructural approaches inside your application code or not? In case, for example, of serverless, do you have monorepo for your application? In that case, do you really have the microservices? Maybe not, right? This is thing to think about. What is the access management? And here I mean, who is responsible for the repositories? Who is responsible for making sure that, for example, you have protected branches, you have pull requests, and those pull requests are fairly enough designed and implemented. What kind of integrations you have with other tools, right? So there are many questions, many more than just simple Git trunk or Git flow, right? And if we have branching on one side, we have delivery strategy on the another side of the stick, right? And here, we already know that delivery is a little bit more complicated than just branching strategy. But honestly, what is the approach to CI and CD in our organization, right? What is approach to continuous delivery? Do we have continuous delivery on continuous deployment? Right? What are the triggers? What are the actions? What are the steps? What we do in between those steps? What kind of testing strategies we have? And here I mean more like what is the method? Do we have manual, automated, maybe hybrid approach? And now, if we have manual approach to tests, we will never have continuous deployment, right? So this is very close together, but as you can see, there is already connection, very strong connection between those two. And what kind of tests we have in the pipeline, because we have a lot of them, like starting from unit, integration, end-to-end, smoke, functional, AB, there is a lot of them, right? So a lot of elements to think about delivery strategies. Also, what we do, how we deliver on the specific environments, and also what kind of deployment strategy we select. And as a deployment strategy, I mean blue-green, blue-violet. If you are not familiar what is blue-violet, this is kind of modification and make the more simpler approach from blue-green. Maybe you heard different colors for violet, because there is blue some color. For me, it doesn't make any difference because I have tendency to be colorblind. So those two. Then we have AB, we have Canary, we have rolling, we have even the recreate, right? So if there is a problem with the deployment, we can recreate the whole environment. And now think about, you have two teams and two components which are working very closely together. And I mean very closely together, right? And one team do the rolling approach to deployment, and second is doing recreate. May this cause problems? Probably yes, right? So again, in this case, even if we have self-organizing and autonomous teams, on the end of the day, they are not delivered alone, right? Artifact management, and here I want to be quite quick, because in this case we need to talk about versioning convention, how we name the versions, what toolkit we use, again, what is the access management to this artifact storage artifact management tool, etc., etc. What is the integration with our pipeline? And here by the integration with pipeline, I mean something what I called loosely integrated or highly integrated, right? So for example, if you have Jenkins and your storage is in S3 in AWS, this will be very loosely integrated, right? Those tools are completely separated. So here we need to talk about different access management, different security, etc., etc., etc. Or we can have highly integrated tools. For example, Azure DevOps has this artifact storage inside the tool itself, right? Another element, SDLC. So what is our approach? Do we work with, for example, Agile or maybe Waterfall or whatever else regarding SDLC? And maybe our approach to the CI/CD is also part of the SDLC, because, for example, we have a team who delivers the platform for CI/CD, right? And here it becomes quite important. What kind of quality gates we have? And very often we think that quality gates are in scope of QAs. Well, yes and no, because DevOps is also about the proper testing, feedback loops, improvements, etc., 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 right? So the quality gates are there. And again, what kind of quality gates types we have? If we have manual gates, we don't have continuous deployment. Simple like that. What are the notifications? Right? Who is responsible? What kind of metrics we collect from it? What kind of delays we are allowed to have? Because imagine that you have full-blown end-to-end test which take 7 hours. In this case, you will never reach possibility to have like a deployment every 30 seconds. I mean, you can, but good luck with that, right? So this is also things which need to be designed properly. What are the escalation paths? Right? This is also important. Another element, and this is more soft element, is the capabilities of the teams and the organization, right? So what is the team composition, team maturity, the team knowledge, how the teams cooperate together, what is the composition or the team topology, right? What kind of constraints we have, which we will see right now, right? So what are the constraints? Generally, everything can be a constraint, right? The business type, because you will design different approach to delivery for the, let's say, company who has the forum where people publish pictures of their cats, than for example, the software who control the medical stuff in the surgery room, right? It will be different, because it will be just simple like that. What are the security boundaries? Because sometimes you will have the limitation that you cannot use cloud-based tools. In this case, you just can forget about Azure DevOps, Travis, etc., 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 right? What are the tooling limitations? What are the time limitations? Because if you want to deliver multiple times in the day, you cannot have like 8 hours long tests. Simple like that. What are the technical constraints? And this, for example, the good example here will be AWS Code Pipeline and Bitbucket. Both are great tools, but they do not like each other. And if you want to build the CI/CD on it, yes, you can, but you need a lot of crazy wiring around. So maybe this constraint is important enough to look on other solutions, right? Responsibilities. So here we talk about people, we talk about processes, who is responsible for what are the escalation policies, paths, time, procedures, etc., etc. And I know that we all love escalations, but honestly, this is very important, because in the moment where something is going wrong, and it will go wrong in some day, you need to have like a procedure. Like this is like you are the pilot of the plane. You have procedures for everything, and you do not do things from your mind because it takes time. It may be not accurate. You just take the book and search for specific error and fix this error with the book, right? Because we are in stress, we are in time pressure, etc., etc., etc. What about the releases, right? And to release here is a little bit different than the deployment itself, because release is more, you can think about this more from the ITIL perspective, where we have release management, etc., 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 right? So it's not the one deployment, it's, for example, pack of deployment for different teams, like this. Rollbacks, and this is interesting, because we have two types of rollbacks. Rollback back, kind of obvious, but we also have rollback forward. Rollback for anyway. So you do not come back to the previous state of your application. You fix this application and deploy the new version, the new version with the fix, right? And now one team is doing rollback back, and you lose completely your backward compatibility with API. And you going forward with completely new API. And what can go wrong, right? And here we need to take into consideration also things like RTO, RPO. So the time needed for the restoration and how much data you can lose. What you do with data loss, what you do with the downtime, if you can have downtime at all, right? What is the granularity of it? Because rollback can mean that you bring back or forward part of the application, one component, or the whole system, right? And the final point, what you do with the databases. And this question is quite tricky one, right? KPIs, and again, we all love KPIs. And here we can talk about service level agreement, service level objective or indicator. So all of those beautiful SLA, SLOs, etc., etc. Very important, especially if we have CI/CD as a platform delivered to other teams. And here we have also DevOps, right? And in DevOps, we think about the measurements. We have to think about the automation. We have to think about the feedback loops, the process, the value stream, etc., etc., right? So quite important elements are here as well. Monitoring. How you monitor your CI/CD, right? What tools you use? What are the responsibilities and who is responsible for what? If there is something wrong with the pipeline, what kind of actions, what kind of events, notification, alerts you trigger? Do you collect logs from your CI/CD? And if yes, how? right? Of quite important questions here. And then we have measurements, and this is a distinct difference between monitoring, like we had here, and measurements. Okay, and I think that those pictures are quite good here, because measurements is more about things like DORA. Right. If you are not familiar with DORA metrics, this is something what came from Google, from SRE, and we have two sections here: throughput and stability. Right. Those are four. In fact, we have four metrics in two sections. Those are high level, like a first layer of measurements of the DevOps at all, right? So in throughput we have deployment frequency and lead time cycle, and in stability we have the time to recover and also change failure rate. And those are the most basic measurements you should have for your CI/CD tools, for your DevOps composition in the organization, right? And this leads us to value streams. And, what is very interesting here, if you really take value stream map and you do the value stream map as Lean says to do, and then you put your CI/CD blocks into this value stream, probably majority of your value stream map will be covered by CI/CD. So that how important CI/CD in the whole process is. Okay. Now tools, obviously, it's always about tools, right? So what kind of tools we use? Do we use the same tool for everything? Do we have different tool for CI/CD, for CD? For CI than for CD? Maybe different for continuous delivery and different for continuous deployment for other teams. What about the licensing? What about the knowledge sharing about the tools, etc., etc., etc. A lot of things, right? And the final one, security. What do you do with the secrets? How do you connect your pipeline with your cloud provider or with your code version control system, right? Do you use any third-party plugins? Are you sure they are secure? Do you force and generate software bill of materials in your pipelines? Because this is quite important. Do you control quality and security aspects of your infrastructure as code? Because for code itself, we all know that there is at least things like SonarQube, right? But what about infrastructure as code? What about the code of the pipeline itself? Are you really sure that your pipeline is secure? Think about it, right? And all of those elements, nice pictures, will lead us to this kind of mind map. And this mind map here is the version 1 of what I've done to not make this picture much more complicated than it is in fact. But this mind map leads us to discussion about the architecture of CI/CD. Why architecture? Because all of those elements here, right? All of those things like organization, branching strategy, SDLC, blah, 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 etc., everything leads into the quality attributes from the architecture perspective, like capacity, scalability, all these abilities which we talk when we discuss architecture, right? And this is the point here, that CI/CD may look completely differently from different points of view. From the engineer position to which is responsible for implementing the pipeline, it will look completely differently than for stakeholders or C-level even, right? And why this approach is quite good? Because it helps architect the vision. This mind map, which I showed you, it doesn't have the entry point or end point, right? You can start with any element you want. You can navigate yourself through any element you want and end on the any element you want, right? But all those elements will bring a complex understanding of all elements related to the pipelines, related to the delivery, related to the CI/CD, right? We can align projects, stakeholders, and business together using this mind map, and we can build common understanding what is and what is not, and this is maybe even more important, what is not possible in our case. Also to unify the tech stack, knowledge, and people. And now you can start, throwing stones in me, because how we want to unify stack, we have agile and self-organizing teams. It's not about order people to use Jenkins only. It's about talking with people and make sure that they will use tooling in the smart way, and the smart way will deliver a value to the organization. And all of this makes kind of Rosetta Stone for CI/CD. Why? Because this is the translation point for business, for stakeholders, for engineers, for architects, and on the end, of course, for the security guys. And they talk different languages, but using this mind map, staying around the table with this mind map, even with different languages, they can find the common places, the common points, and they can discuss things. And this is proved in the battle, honestly speaking. So that's all from my side. I'm already out of the time. So this is my links to connect with me. I'd be happy to connect with you. And CICD.run, there you can find this framework. You can download this mind map. You can see a little bit more information than I gave you now. And I hope you enjoy it. If you agree with this approach, let me know. If you disagree, let me know as well, because I'm here to improve this framework. And thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you very much, Pawel. That was amazing. I actually really learned how broad this topic is, talking CI/CD, tying it to the strategical level. Also, one thing that came to my mind related to the value streams, that us at Efficode offer this pipeline game. It's free online. So I think that's wonderful tool. If you do value stream mapping, you can do your CI/CD mapping in the pipeline game. So I can put the link in there so everyone can check that. But yeah, I really love this. I feel that my knowledge in CI/CD just exploded. But yeah, we had some questions there. Also, people learned something new. They heard the blue-violet deployment for the first time, and then they were discussing that this is a combination of blue-green and what was it? Blue something else.
In my case, it was blue-violet, but I heard like blue-red, blue-yellow, whatever else kind of colors already. So the difference here is very, very important, however, kind of small, because blue-green deployment means that you have like two legs, completely separated two legs of your infrastructure, really, and your application, right? And the change is happening on the DNS, on the entry point to your system. Blue-violet or blue anything will move this a little bit lower. So imagine that you have two legs, but they are starting on one knee. Right. So generally you have one entry point, you have one place where everything is done. But for example, for one specific component, one specific microservice, you have load balancer and you direct traffic between two distinct part of or two distinct versions of this application, right? And now the point is that what's going on top is quite easy, right? In the beginning of the path, but also interesting what's going on down, because here we have another components. Here we have also databases, right? With blue-green, even if the approach to databases is complicated, however, it's simple from the process perspective. You need to have second database period. What in this blue-violet is also the point of the discussion, and how you will deal with that, and how much it will interfere with the system existing.
All right, thank you. I hope the audience got some clarification as well. They said that they Googled the blue violet and found nothing.
Yeah.
So now they know what it is.
Yeah, that's true. That was the first, color map I saw like 10 years ago, and I stay with this color somehow.
Yeah, that's great. We also had some other question. This is a bit longer one. Do you have some general advice regarding to making the development and testing easier for developers / testers in teams with more than 15 people, preferably without them needing to do much job adapting to the new approach?
So you
Quick and easy wins for the big teams.
You already pushed the boundaries, heavy boundaries now. First of all, 50 people, 50 or 15 doesn't matter. It's 15, both numbers are too high, right? Because if you look on the communication number of the communication lines between people, you will see that it starts to grow very rapidly if you have more than 8-9 people in the team. 9 people is like optimal, right? Or maximum, let's say. So you should have multiple teams at all. And I will kind of dissatisfy you with my answer, but I will say everything starts with people. If they talk with each other, if they hear each other, if they respect each other, and if they try to find a solution together, they are in good path to find the solution, to find the proper collaboration. If not, anything you will do, anything, any approach you will force or implement will fail. Sad but true.
Yeah, people are the most important. That's where to start. Processes and tools follow when people are having fun and enjoying their work.
Yeah.
But thank you a lot.
Hi, we're from EFICode, the driving force behind the DevOps Conference.
Regardless of where you are on your DevOps journey, there's always the next step. With our experience in successful DevOps transformations, we're excited to support you in taking the next step.
Find us at eficode.com and have an amazing time watching the talks at the DevOps Conference.